I'm going back to Abuja now. Mr. Shola Ajay, it appears that even though some people know when they receive an item, they can tell this is fake news, but it appears that there's some incentive, there's some gratification for sharing those kind of fake news. Is there anything we can do about this? Because in the original sense, one of the interesting things about news is that it's odd, and people like odd things. Is there anything we can do about this?
Thank you. There's a lot that can be done, but like I previously said, it is almost too early to measure the impact of fake news on this particular general election. You know, of course, it's no secret that the American election itself had a very different outcome if certain fake news had not been involved. You know, but now, if we look at it from this other perspective, we're saying fake news, or earlier, as I was discussing with Dr. Deshi, whatever happens in this election, it's important that the next election needs to begin. Planning for the next election needs to begin the very next day after this election is over. Why? Because a lot of the problems we're going to run into is not as a result of the fact that no one is not paying attention, is because of lack of planning. And in the situation that I was sharing with you earlier, how do you even begin to identify fake news? What are some of the methods that you can use to cross-check? I was complimenting the current government seriously for releasing some 10 billion. But that is paltry. If you look at it in terms of the digital crossover, which, of course, will proliferate all the various broadcasting houses that will have a role to play in checkmating some of these fake news. See, so it's, at this point, it's like a dog chasing its tail. We don't know yet the kind of impact that the fake news will have on this election, because, look, there are two gladiators now that are the key people to vote for. One is Mr. Integrity. The other is, we're told, is Mr. Fix-It. Internationally, everybody's interested because the key thing in all of this is corruption. And neither one is saying much about tackling corruption.
All right, we have somebody here who can tell us about
anything that comes out of it.
Mr. Ajay,
you know.
Yeah, your point is taken, but you mentioned something earlier about mechanisms in place to check fake news. We have someone in the studio who's been doing a lot of work in that space of social media and fake news. Yeah, Missy, what measures do we have locally? And what sort of partnerships do we have locally to combat our own species of fake news?
Yeah, I mean, back to Mr. Ajay's point where he was speaking about the BBC and AFP and obviously companies that have massive resources. There's an organisation in the UK called First Draft who came to Nigeria and I think worked with over a dozen newsrooms to train them specifically to help debunk misinformation in the lead up to the election. And this included print publications like Punch, radio outlets, a couple of broadcasting houses. I think it's also important to note that working with media houses is not the only way to debunk fake news. There has to be a holistic approach. It's not just looking at social media and, you know, putting in regulations or training journalists. All these are part of the solution, but no one solution is going to work. It's a holistic issue. So it has to be tackled on a multifaceted way. But there are local resources. And again, the rest of the world is also grappling with this issue. a lot of misinformation was spread during the Brazil elections, for example, even in the US election. So other countries are also trying to combat this problem. So in as much as we need to look at what's on ground in Nigeria, because sometimes the consequences of fake news in Nigeria can be much more devastating than in other countries, we have to also understand the rest of the world is also grappling with this. This is a new frontier in terms of how we deal with this because of social media and the internet.
Oh, all right, Mr. Nnamdi, in recent times we've seen one of those platforms step to the game and say we're not going to allow, or we're going to try to reduce the traffic of fake news on our platform, and that's WhatsApp. They've come up with some campaign to help their users identify fake news, or to at least tell that this information I received is not from the original author, telling us that, okay, see, once you see forwarded, you know, that's a red flag.
Yes.
And that's WhatsApp. How long before we begin to see other platforms step up the game in terms of campaign against fake news, and not just campaign, to help people see how they can spot fake news and then deal with it appropriately?
Okay, I know that Facebook also has something where they are able to track news sites that regularly sends out news that are not completely true. I know I have seen on some Facebook feed where there's a link you can click on and it tells you this link is not correct, or the story, this is actually fake news. I think that's another step by a platform to ensure that users of the platform, if you recall, in the US, it was a big issue with the analytical story as to how they consciously pushed fake news to influence the US election. So for Facebook to now take this approach where they are flagging those fake news content by themselves, that's a step in the right direction. I'm hoping that as we develop further, now one of the foundation where people are able to share fake news is anonymity. So you see somebody sets up a Twitter account or a Facebook account, and the username is some name you cannot decipher. So I'm thinking that if we go a step further, and at least on that, at the barest minimum, have people properly identified on their social media handle. You can say the person who shared this news is Mr. XYZ, who can be identified. That way, if I want to take civil action against that individual who has purposely or who is continuously pushing out news that he or she knows not to be true, I can actually trace the person and then either file an action, either a civil action or a criminal action. So I think that would also help with reducing the incidence of fake news when we can identify users on each of these platforms.
But sometimes the damage is done not even by the original sources of the fake news themselves, sometimes, or in fact, most especially by those who are running with it.
So let
my friends, your friends, you know, and then of course, I mean, it's like multiple stream of dissemination.
Yes.
So who do you pin down?
It originated from somebody.
Let consequences attach to the person who is. So if I retweet it, I should also bear some sort of consequence, so that tomorrow, if I see something that I'm not too sure of the origin, before I retweet, before I broadcast, I'll try to do some investigation myself to be sure that what I'm about to send out is actually the truth. Now, where there are no consequences, people will continue to behave in any manner that they like. So that would help if for every single person who retweets or who shares something that is not factually correct. And I understand your worries about regulation. I don't mean specifically, it doesn't have to be criminal sanction. It can be civil sanction.
The word regulation doesn't sound good.
It can be civil. So I can take out an action in libel or slander against the particular person who retweeted that thing. It doesn't have to involve a jail term or some sort of fine being paid. So tomorrow, ordinarily, we have the laws for libel and slander. So if you purposely say something against me that is not true, I can maintain an action against you in court. So I should be able to do that even with your social media posting. So if you retweet a content that is not factually correct, I should be able to sue you in a civil court. I'm not even talking of criminal action. And that, I don't think, is infringing on your right, your freedom of speech. There is where your freedom starts.
Another
exactly
one begins.